Everybody, California Times here. This is me. I'm Guy Meyer. I'm with Amy Kalish. And once again, we're talking about our beautiful state of California and the housing issues that we are facing. And Amy, who is on the Tamalpais Design Review Board in the county of Marin and also has a website, is a voice of sanity and survival in California with her wakeca.org website as well as citizenmarin.org. Is that right, Amy? Did I get it right there?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, Amy. Good to have you connected again. So you were just giving me the lowdown about your busy schedule, and among the other things that you were delving into was a Tahoe evacuation report. What's going on with that?
Well, the evacuation study came out a few months ago, but it seems like the news has just picked it up. And I think that's because a lot of new developments are planned and they're trying to get approval. And as it stands now, evacuating the basin would take 14 hours. And they estimate that 99% of all the structures there are at risk. That basically means that your survival possibility is pretty minimal if a fast-moving fire comes through and you have a traffic jam that goes all around the lake, all the feeder roads that are going into that one area trying to get out. You'd be sitting in smoke the whole time. What's interesting is the fire chief that's at Fallen Leaf Lake seems to be very comfortable discussing how dangerous this is. But when you get to the larger fire departments around where the developments would be, they are saying that this is way overblown. And I find that to be actually laughable because it's not overblown. If you want to start at where we are now, which is no fire, and then fire, you can obviously see what will happen if a lot of people need to get out of there. There's just this makes no sense to me. But it's something that you see all across California, which is that fire departments seem almost to have a gag order where they're not supposed to discuss housing and the impact of more housing and the evacuation potential of an area. So I was a little disappointed, but not completely surprised when there was pushback against this evacuation study.
It does seem amazing to me that Tahoe is even still being developed, that there's more room for development from what I understand, just the everyday in and egress in and out for all the holiday vacationers is pretty, what can we say, an event that they don't necessarily look forward to getting in there.
It's completely true, and the reality is on the California side, they have a certain number of permits that they'll issue each year for a home, but there is no restriction when it comes to a major development. So if you wanted to have a new resort, you can still propose that, and it wouldn't be subject to the other restriction. But when you add a new resort and you're adding, let's say, 3,000 people coming in and out of one road that ends somewhere, you're adding that many people to an evacuation. It's really something that needs to be considered. And in most of the scenarios that you see, when they try to add a development or they try to see what the impact of the development would be, they take things piecemeal and they never take into account all of the developments being considered. That's actually what's going on in Sonoma, around the Sonoma Developmental Center, is that there's 6 different projects. But when they do an impact study, they'll only look at the one that's being considered at a time. So the Tahoe study should be an enormous wake-up for people that you could have mass casualties if there's a fire up there and you have wind on the scale of what we've been seeing lately.
Yeah, that's the level of which what you might think of as if there was like an environmental organization or movement or organization that existed in Tahoe, which I'm sure there certainly was, and I'm not sure what it exists now, but the whole question is no longer about just preserving the beauty of localities. It's the lethality of the potential lethality of what they're proposing and their disregard for, in spite of all the evidence of what California does, that they want more and more still.
It used to be that they would hold back the number of permits based on the amount of water that was available. But now it seems when you have as many large scale luxury developments as you have now, none of that seems to be taken into consideration.
All right, I'm going to slight pause here. I got, I don't know if my door is open here. We're going to have a little cut. So we were just talking about the Tahoe and a report in Tahoe, and I suppose one could do, again, the concept is, what about all of Marin County? What's going on totally in Marin County, or just the pockets of the Ross Valley. But now we're not even allowed to look at that. Apparently, communities, right, where we don't no longer have that, what was called police power. That was our right to protect our local communities, correct?
Yeah, the developments are supposed to have, if they have an effect on health and safety, they're supposed to be, a way to withdraw them. But that doesn't mean safety about things that could happen in the future. Something has to be happening right then. It's safety hazard, like a big hole in the ground. That's kind of the way that things are measured. So health and safety doesn't take into account any of this evacuation issue. And it's especially galling because we have the attitude from the state that for some reason one size fits all here, so that you can just fit 15% more housing in every community without looking at it. In Sausalito, they're having trouble with their 740 units that they're supposed to site. And there was a very offensive piece of journalism or opinion piece that came out from the Chronicle last week, saying that the city of Sausalito was the most NIMBY city ever. And it talked about all the shenanigans that they're going through. And never does it mention that there is basically one major road that is filled with tourists in the summer, absolutely filled, that there are very few buildable lots left. And there are concerns that the city has and concerns that the residents have about adding a tremendous amount of housing. And that housing that has been proposed, the first piece was like to set it right on top of historic buildings in the historic district. And on its face, that's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole point of Sausalito's economy is that it's a beautiful tourist location and attraction. And the amount of housing that was going to go in there, something like 46 luxury condos, and 6 of them would be available to low income, which here is, $98,000 to $140,000 a year or something. So the city doesn't need that amount of traffic and that amount of new people living there without any place to park anyway. And if there was an actual issue, if a fire came up, and there was, especially with wind, there are so many older structures up there that are very vulnerable to fire. The new ones aren't as vulnerable, but you just have a conflagration and a tremendous heat. Everything can just go up, and people will not be able to get out. So when I hear about how NIMBY this city is, it's like, we need to stop using that word and look at why people might be resisting putting in massive amounts of housing. and what the actual consequences to their community would be, and stop blaming them for being hesitant to put in things that they can't handle.
That's their MO, and even if there was some element of somebody being whatever racially offended, you're getting at the point that is, I mean, we are just destroying the beauty of California. We are really turning. We're just so blind. It's stunning that we could just think of doing this to the coast, California coast, for instance, or Sausalito.
Well, all the new laws this time around seem to be focused on getting rid of CEQA and the Coastal Commission because they're inhibitors to housing. And one thing that's especially irritating about that is the Coastal Commission is being blamed for the lack of affordable housing on the coast. But I think it was in 1986 that was removed from their purview, that they were no longer allowed to have any say over affordable housing. So even if they had wanted to, that was not something that they could be involved in. So it's being used as kind of this weird kind of cudgel to say that they're anti-affordable housing when it is not something that they've actually been allowed to address since 1986, I believe.
You made a statement in a written piece. Maybe it was something that maybe it was a message to me, but I think it was a message that's part of your own communications. That, and it's a radical message, but it seems so necessary that somehow California has an obligation, or at least it appears that the Democrats or Governor Newsom sees that we have this obligation to take on, as you put it, accommodate an endless amount of people who want to move to California. That this is somehow our duty to do this, or do you?
Well, the number that was first brought up for the next 8-year cycle was from Newsom during his campaign, and it was 3.5 million, which apparently was based on nothing. Later, he said it was an aspirational number. Then the HCD, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, reduced the number to 2.5 million. And when you ask the Department of Finance in California what the population will be like in 8 years, it's flat. When you ask them what it would be like out to 2060, it's flat. And this is before we lost 55,000 tech jobs in the last couple of years just up here. This is before massive cuts have been, are starting to come our way now from the federal government cutting back on jobs. But also, cities like Los Angeles, a lot of cities are very close to the edge of bankruptcy right now. And their response to that is to lay people off. So when people are laid off and they're looking for housing that they can afford, or they have to leave California, they're not looking for the kind of housing that's being built. That might attract new people who have money to California, but they aren't coming here for jobs. They aren't coming here to help our economy. They might be buying a second home or something else, but the actual need is not being addressed by any of these numbers at all. And when a development is proposed, if it wants to take advantage of density bonuses, and maybe they're supposed to add 20% of their units at below market rate, that's the starting point. Then once they start getting a density bonus, it only increases the number of market rate units to the point where a 20% can start dropping down to 10 or below 10, because those units never have to go up in number. The percentage of units overall goes up, but it never affects the ones at the bottom. So there's nothing about this policy that helps people that either have less income or have been struggling with the small income that they've had. When we have job growth now, it's in jobs that don't pay very well. We're losing most of our really good paying jobs. the income inequality is skewed even worse now. People at the very top are making much more, and the people at the bottom are working 2 and 3 jobs to get by. They cannot afford the housing that's being built. And California redevelopment agencies that used to do this between 1946 to 2012, they used to develop workforce housing and community development that would actually bring in business and create something economically feasible for a city and help, and was put together with cooperation from a city. That got shut off in 2012. So the state of California has not built anything since 2012. They don't participate in that. They're expecting the private industries to do that, and they're only going to do it for profit. So that's the situation that we're in. That's why all of these laws are constructed the way that they are.
And
They're for-profit laws.
but they are designed to drive the industry in some way. The goal is, there's 2.5 million houses for the, I say, supposed housing crisis. To me, I just feel like we're on a environmental or common sense crisis on the planet in general. But I think California, if we were the leaders of the